Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for my Q&A, so let me put my hat on, and let's get to this first question. Alright. Jason, would you be willing to share any thoughts you have on the new Netflix documentary, What the Health, and some of the claims made by their choice of panel of experts, specifically claims that all animal products are essentially toxic to the body and destroy health. Meat, especially chicken, is the true cause of diabetes, etc. Thanks. Alright, I haven't seen this documentary. I've seen a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people, experts coming through my social media and stuff talking about it. This documentary, from what I can tell, is literally nothing more than a piece of vegan propaganda. There's no reason to think that lean meats contribute to diabetes in any way. Animal protein contributes to diabetes in any way. No dietitians are even suggesting such a thing. Now, do dietitians suggest large amounts of saturated fat contribute to diabetes? Yes, absolutely. Do they hold that refined sugars contribute to diabetes? Yes, absolutely. Is the person who combines the two together in large amounts most likely to get diabetes out of anybody else, lifestyle-wise? Yes, they are. All right. Being sedentary, eating too much saturated fat or too much fructose is the leading causes of diabetes. That's how you get it. All right. This sort of documentary is complete and utter nonsense. It's literally nothing more than, from what I can tell from the little bit I've seen and heard, probably nothing more than vegan propaganda. And it makes me not want to watch it because I'm actually familiar with some of the good vegan proponents out there, medical doctors, and they're not saying stuff like this. All right, they're not making these sort of absurd claims. The ones who cure diabetes and things, they're not making these sort of claims. Complete and utter absurdity, not based on reality. Again, you have to remember, vegans have an agenda. They have an agenda. And I'm going to go so far as to say I have heard vegan speakers say that they believe that saving the animals from the slaughterhouses and everything else is more important than telling the truth. And there have been vegan speakers, major speakers, who said stuff like that, that if they had to lie in order to convince more people to not eat animals, that would be by far the lesser of two evils, and that would be worth it. That the lying in order to save lives is totally acceptable. And they consider animals to be lives, almost as valuable or just as valuable, and in some cases more valuable, depending upon the vegan, than human life. So they view this as saving lives, and they will absolutely lie in order to do so. And from their moral perspective, it makes sense. And arguably, I mean, truth be told, if I considered animals to be equal to people, then yeah, I would have no problem lying at all. I would have no trouble lying in order to save animals. Why wouldn't you? Because again, we all are going to do bad things in our life, but sometimes the end justify the means, and that's the reality of it. Stopping murder with lies, if you view it as murder, makes sense. And that's exactly what vegans do. That's exactly what they do. Some of them actually believe it, but a lot of the top ones, they don't, because they know better. They know the research doesn't show it. All right, next question. 5x5 strength training seems difficult to make gains on when prepping for a 1.5 mile PT run. Any suggestions on what weightlifting routine flows well with the training to run in order to not lose too much strength, or just in general, what's a good lifting routine to mix in with PT training, running, sit-ups, push-ups, etc.? Problem is there is no answer, because we don't know anything about your level of experience. We don't know anything about where you are in your training. So I can't suggest a routine. Now, if you're still a novice lifter running a novice 5x5, that's fine. Cut back to a 3x5. Cut back to a 3x5. Keep your weights constant, maybe even drop them 5%. All right, drop your weights 5% from your 5x5, do a 3x5 until you have completed all your training for whatever challenge it is that you're doing. All right, you can't serve two masters, and that includes with your body. I'm not saying people can't train for endurance and strength concurrently, but in your case, you're clearly doing something that you're struggling with. You're trying to make too much progress in two different areas at the same time. You're going to have to prioritize, and if getting your run times down is more important to you than gaining muscle or strength, then you can coast. Cut back to 3x5, stop progressing until you master the other stuff you want to adapt to and master, and once you have it where you want it, you can return to progressing. Now, just like many other athletes, People like Alex Viada for hybrid athletes have them run concurrent style training, but you're probably not at that level, and you're trying to get ready for a 1.5 mile run. It's not like you're prepping for a marathon here or anything. Let's be realistic. You probably don't need any sort of complex training. You're probably not an advanced lifter squatting 450, 500 pounds prepping for a marathon. You can keep it very simple the way that I just described. Now, if you are an advanced lifter and you are squatting 500 pounds and you are prepping to run a lot more than 1.5 miles, then by all means go read someone's book like Alex Viada's The Hybrid Athlete. All right, next question. Recently, you advised late novices to switch to 5x3 if recovery is an issue, switch to the intermediate if they stall for a month. No, I said 3x5. Why not drop the weight 10 pounds and increase reps to 6x3, 7x3, or 8x3? If manageable, then go back to the program. Tonnages goes up and still linear progressive resistance, but volume becomes a tool alongside the mechanical tension. You got the numbers mixed, brother. The number first is the number of sets, not the number of reps. Okay, so I see what you're doing here. You've just got them flipped. So when I read this question, I thought you were talking about adding sets of 3 because of the way you wrote it. It's possible to do it the way that you described. If you're struggling, a person could totally do something that way. They could switch the volumes around in that manner and try to increase reps until they get to 8. But you know what? I've already written prescriptions like that. I've actually written programs like that for people who reach a certain threshold. I've discussed that in detail quite a bit using that sort of progression rate, and that's totally acceptable. To work with a weight that you can do 3 sets of 5 with, and try to do 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 7, 3 sets of 8. And when you're over time, but that's a slower method, and that might be better for an intermediate. Your other method is, the other that I thought you were talking about, is totally doable too for people who are moving into the intermediate phase. Accumulation work is what that's called. You add triples. You, over time, take a weight that you might do 3 sets of 3 with, even relatively light, one that you could probably do more than that with, maybe even a 6 or 8 rep max, and you build up triples over time until they become easy. When you get to 10 sets of 3, you increase weight, drop it down to 3 sets of 3, and build up from there. I was using training like that for a little while when I wasn't really filming. And guys are like, why weren't you filming? You guys know why I wasn't filming. Because I was having major stalker problems, and it was really, really a problem. And it wasn't a little minor situation. It was one where gyms that I've trained at and stuff, people were calling and harassing them, blowing up their stuff. And people need to remember, there were gyms that were lit up and had their businesses attacked purely because of rumors that I trained there. Gyms that I've never set foot in or even seen the outside of in my life were actually being attacked and were given hundreds of negative reviews, and their phone lines being harassed because someone started rumors that I trained there. Literally. And so this is how insane these people are on the internet. So the reason I wasn't filming videos for a little while, because it's just without permission from a business who's ready to deal with it. You don't do that when you know that you have insane, crazy stalkers. And yeah, these people actually harmed businesses that had never even heard of me, where I'd never used their business purely because of rumors. So that's how crazy and psycho all these people are online. They actually did that. So again, it shows you how really careless and sociopathic these people really are. But yeah, I was training like that for a little while, and that's also a very acceptable way, and that's called accumulation work. When you start building up triples or 5 rep sets over time with submaximal weight, that you add volume until you reach a certain threshold of an increase. And actually, I did that for a little while even on camera back in the UK when I was training at home, because it was easy to get away with that sort of training with my own equipment. So that's also an option. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I'm working a physical job, wall and floor tiling. Sometimes I'm kneeling down all day, and sometimes it makes my lower back and knees feel tired. So how can I work legs around that since I'm not able to squat the weight I normally would? Should I do some alternative that puts less stress on the back? Thank you. The real question becomes, how long have you been doing this type of work? Because over time you will adapt. And here's the other thing. People need to remember, weight on the bar and fatigue do go hand in hand. If you're fatigued from working all day, but you come in and you work at something that's a rate of perceived exertion 9, and you're like, but if I didn't have this physical labor job, this would be easy. I could easily do 5 reps with 20 or 25 pounds more than this. Easily. But here's the thing. you still have a tension and you still have fatigue. And if you're training every day after work and you see progressive overload over the months, won't you grow the same? Your muscles are already fatigued, so you're still hitting those upper threshold fibers from a weight that would be a little bit light for you normally, due to the overall cumulative fatigue. And people need to understand that. Just because you can lift more weight in a certain recovered environment doesn't mean that when you're fatigued, due to other physical labor, not just total body fatigue, but the actual muscles you're working, due to some work or other things that you've done, doesn't mean that it's not stimulating growth if progressive overload is there. Because let's say you've been front squatting, you could do, I don't know, 225 for 5 reps, but then you're forced to drop down to 185 because you're so tired. And those muscles are fatigued from what you're doing at work. And so over time, you build that 185 up to, in your fatigued state, up to doing 225 for 5, you will have progressive overload there. And if people don't understand that, then the question I would ask people, if you don't think the fatigue that you get in later sets, even if you're weaker, doesn't matter, then why does anyone do multi-set training in the gym? Like, why do you guys ever reduce the weight? Why would you ever curl after doing chin-ups? You can't do as much weight on a curl being fatigued after chin-ups or rows than you can with a curl, so why would you do that? Because the fatigue is cumulative, meaning those muscles are fatigued and you're doing further metabolic fatigue with the later work. So I mean, if we followed that chain of logic that if you're forced to use less weight or less workload later in a workout, then you would never do a long workout. There'd be no point in doing multiple sets, right? Because only the fresh one counts. It's the same logic, and when you think about it that way, it starts to make sense. So that's what's up. All right, next question. For your off-season linear hypertrophy program, you recommend doing squats and deadlifts on Monday, Thursday, and upper body on Tuesday, Friday. Why do most routines have people do upper body first with lower body the next day? Can you discuss the benefits, or is it just preference? Thanks for all the great content. Keep up the good work. Why do people do it? Because it's a tradition. Someone started it that way. Someone years ago wrote a program, upper body Monday, upper body Thursday, lower body Tuesday, lower body Friday. And because that was a pattern that many people got established with upper lower splits decades ago, that's just what people write. Do you really think that your body resets on Sunday? Like, do you think God reaches down from heaven on Sunday and says, this is your magical rest day? This is where the week starts in the Gregorian calendar, and your body resets itself? Or do you think that your body doesn't know what day of the week it is? It only knows fatigue, time, sleep, things like that. All right, your body doesn't magically reset. Jesus doesn't come down from heaven on Sunday and reset your recovery and everything going on in your body. The week doesn't start on Sunday because in your body doesn't know that. All right, that's just the calendar that we've written, that we schedule our lives around. People get these things confused. That's not where it starts. That's just where you're arbitrarily starting because you've decided, like most of society, that Sunday is the start of the week. Because that's how we work our calendars, because we need to schedule our lives. Don't let the scheduling of your life make you think that your body thinks in terms of 7-day blocks. It doesn't. All right, next question. Dear Jason, lately Mike O'Hearn has been posting ridiculous triceps exercises that have some weird form and enormous weights. My question is, don't you think these exercises do more harm than good? I've also heard him mention that these heavy ass workouts are good for tendons. Your take? I don't know what all he's doing, but I've seen Mike do some weird form on tricep exercises. Yeah, some really bizarre isolation movements can absolutely cause connective tissue inflammation. They can cause inflammation. They can be problematic. I don't think people need to do a lot of isolation work. Isolation work should be carefully selected. You should never say, oh, I just need to do more work for my biceps and pick a random exercise. All my triceps need to work, so you just pick a random exercise and angle. No, you need to think through, why am I picking this exercise? What is it going to give to me that I'm not getting from a compound movement? You know, you might say, okay, I do the closed grip bench press, so I'm going to select a tricep isolation because my triceps need more work. Do you pick one randomly, or do you look at the biomechanics of it and say, what is it that I need this tricep extension to do for me that my closed grip bench press doesn't? And can I do so safely and with less stress on the body? Because a lot of isolation movements do inflame connective tissue and joints more so than compounds do. That's what you need to look at. He's probably doing a lot of random weird stuff because Mike is genetically gifted and on enormous amounts of drugs, and he can do whatever the hell he wants and get big and massive as long as he trains hard. Now, as far as them being good for tendons, heavy training done with proper programming, proper workloads, proper recovery does make your tendons stronger. That's a proven fact. That's not even subject to debate. No expert in exercise science questions that. That's understood. So I don't see why that would be a point of contention. Heavy work strengthens your tendons. Proven fact. Not even subject to debate. No expert would ever argue against that. They would look like an idiot if they did. So he might be right. If it's heavy and you're recovering from it and your tendons aren't getting inflamed, then yes, it'll make them stronger. Basic exercise science. All right, next question. Jason, how come when I eat less and I end up stalling in weight loss? I'm 5'2", 115 pounds, female by the way. When I eat more, I start losing again. I do notice that I exercise a lot more and fidget more when my calories are like 1,600 versus 1,400, and I'm not so tired. Well, what I would say, you need to remember a lot of times when you drop calories lower, yeah, you will have less energy turnover because you might fidget less, but 200 calories is probably at most what you're going to do more. So you're probably not actually losing tissue weight more quickly. What's happening when you drop calories lower sometimes, you have slightly more cortisol because you have less circulating insulin, more cortisol. Certain hormones in your body respond to cause you to start retaining water. That's all it is. That's all it is. Sometimes reducing calories in the short term will cause the body to start to retain more water. Eventually it will swoosh off. What is ended up happening is you're dropping them slightly lower, you're increasing calories slightly more, you're probably getting a little more carbs or a little more protein with that extra 200 calories. You're getting slightly more insulin activity, IGF-1, all of that stuff. It's driving your cortisol down just a hair, so then your body flushes the extra water weight it was retaining. You're not actually losing body fat more quickly, though. Pretty straightforward. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, I've heard you mention that belts are only to lift more weight and for aesthetic-oriented people. Would it be okay if an intermediate, non-competitive person trained exclusively with a belt? You know what? It's okay however anyone wants to train, but you're going to have a weaker core and you're going to be less functional. All right? I don't like anyone using belts who isn't going to compete in a belt. And I would argue the opposite. People say, competitive versus non-competitive. Why would you wear a belt if you're not going to compete? If you are not going to compete in some sport that lets you wear a belt, why would you train with a belt? Because I don't believe that the extra weight you can lift automatically leads to more hypertrophy or more strength. I can assure you it doesn't lead to more strength in the real world where you might have to do something without a belt. So if you wanted to actually be overall stronger, I recommend beltless training, and people can argue about that all day long. I'm not a fan of belts. I think belts should be left to the realm of people who compete with a belt. So it's actually quite the opposite. If you just want to be fit and healthy, learn to train without a belt. If you want to be competitive and compete in a sport that lets you wear a belt in your sport, then by all means train with a belt. That's my general stance on it, so hopefully that makes more sense. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.